can't tell you how much this means to us at Child Find, especially to Phyllis, to be able to meet with Jonah and be part of his story. With the nature of the work that we do, meeting someone that was missing for such a long period of time is an extremely rare occurrence. We are grateful that Jonah has agreed to be with us today. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our interviewer, Chris Krieger, Child Find President Phyllis Hallett, and our special guest, Jonah Kent.
Thanks very much. My name is Chris Krieger. As Sue said, I'm a former Saskatoonian. I actually used to work Global News as a news anchor, and currently I'm in Calgary running a production company with a couple of business partners. My colleague Chantal Kolesnik and I at the back are actually working on a documentary featuring our guest of honor, Jonah Kent. Jonah has an incredible story we'd like to talk to you about. In 1975, when Jonah was 2 years old, he was abducted by his father. The family was vacationing in Florida, and his mom didn't see Jonah again for 17 years. Even just talking about that is something incredible and even hard to imagine. Jonah, did you even realize you were missing? I mean, you were taken at the age of 2. You know, what kind of memories did you have? When did you realize that this wasn't normal, if that's the right word?
I was just moving a lot. I was really the only thing that I noticed that was different from everybody else. You know, I was 19 before I knew that anything about it.
Right. Now, Phyllis, you were instrumental along with Child Find in helping to find Jonah. You helped the police get involved in this case. You actually didn't get involved until 1985.
Right.
Child Find was recently incorporated, and you got the call from Jonah's mom. This is 10 years after Jonah went missing. There were some roadblocks in trying to find Jonah, is that right? And one of the biggest ones is the fact that Jonah was abducted in Florida.
Yes, because in Florida at that time, it was not a criminal offense to abduct your child. So he was registered as stolen, which meant we didn't have a lot of assistance from law enforcement. And he was on the Canadian Police Information System at one time. And because back then, with no computers, no technology, you have to remember things moved very, very slowly. And unfortunately, there wasn't enough action on that case, so it was purged or dropped. So we ended up trying many, many times. I had 2 contacts, the RCMP Missing Children's Registry in Ottawa, and I tried the one that was in charge first, and he wasn't able to help me at all, after going back and forth many times.
Sure.
And then I tried the other person who was in charge, and she was going to try to find out why Jonah was dropped from the system, and she came back and said, "I'm sorry, there's just no way I can find out." So that was one of the roadblocks. And another one was we had a private investigator come and offer his assistance to us. But in the meantime, when we first took on the case, we had to make sure that Jonah's mom got joint custody of Jonah, because they were a family when they left, so there was no custody orders or no divorce or anything like that at that time. So we had to make sure that she had some legal rights. So we had a lawyer here in town assist us so Jonah's mom could get joint custody of Jonah.
Right. Now, Jonah, you mentioned that you were moving a lot. Where were you for these 17 years? What were you and your dad doing? What was happening? You did not go to school, is that right?
No, not a day. Started out in Fort Lauderdale. We had owned property in Brooksville, Florida for a while. Mm-hmm. And then I just remember I received a pair of boxing gloves. I was just telling Phyllis from, I think it was my grandmother. I think my mother sent it to my grandmother. Then we received those in the mail, and we were packing up pretty quick after that.
Because your dad was obviously concerned that maybe people were getting close?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I can only surmise, right?
And you certainly, weren't being informed by your dad of what was happening and why you were moving. No. Did you get any sense of that's just the way it was, or?
Yeah, as I got older, I kind of was under the impression that it was a relationship thing. Things didn't work out. There was an age gap, and that was it. That was about it. Right.
Phyllis, you talked about this a bit before, but obviously in 1985, when you started helping to look for Jonah, the world was very different, right? Your investigative tools were what? A telephone, a fax machine.
And a
personal
typewriter.
visits, the library, typewriter, sending letters, right? So,
Right, and pictures.
right.
And back in those days, when Jonah's mother gave us that picture, Jonah, 5 years old, we took it to Reliable Photo. They made a negative for us, and they printed 4 dozen pictures for us. Then we would mail those to some of our contacts. And in those years, we had contacts with every daily newspaper and every weekly newspaper in Saskatchewan. And they would use the pictures as fillers. But it took a long time to get the pictures to them, and we usually sent about 4 or 6 of them, and they would use them over a certain period of time. So it was just, everything just took a real long time to get anywhere.
It really was a different world.
Yeah.
And, you know, did that kind of lack of technology at that time maybe help you guys kind of stay under the radar?
Yeah. I mean, I think at that time you needed a building this big to have a computer, right? It was a thing, right? So, yeah, I think so. And we, like, to the end, he never really, you know, I tried getting him to YouTube something, and it was not happening, right? So, yeah, I would have to say it did, yeah.
And Phyllis, did, you know, as the kind of search went on, did you realize that maybe you guys were getting close? Did you get any clues from people that there were, say, sightings of Jonah or anything like that?
Oh, yes. Every time we had posters in the Maritimes, I'd get a phone call from Child Find Nova Scotia saying, "Oh, you found Jonah?" And I say, "No, we haven't found Jonah." Because someone was going around either taking the posters down or marking them located.
Right.
So it was an uphill battle, you might say.
So there was potentially some interference on the East Coast with kind of the search for Jonah. And do you know anything about that?
My father, he was a PI straight out of Korea, and that's what he did first before he did everything else, and specializing in kidnapping. So,
right,
it's, you know, he knew what he was doing, right?
And there definitely, we don't know this for a fact, but there is speculation that your dad made a conscious decision to remove you from Florida because he could get away with it, for lack of a better term.
You mean to do the whole thing in Florida?
Yeah.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew what he was doing, so.
Right. And when the search was kind of continuing, you got an interesting late night phone call, I think, from an American police officer, is that right?
Yes, it was in July 1992, and it was 9:30 in the evening, and the sheriff in Texas called me and said, "I know where Jonah and his dad are." This was in July. The investigator did a lot of work from July on, putting pressure on the family in the Maritimes to get some more information. And because if we knew where Jonah was, and we also knew that we just couldn't walk up to him and say, "Your mom's looking for you."
Sure.
So Mom was putting together a binder of her life since Jonah had gone missing, and we were in touch with the Salvation Army because they were going to act. There was no police intervention for us at all at that time. So the Salvation Army was our other avenue. And just getting so close, Christmas Eve day, Jonah phoned his mom.
Right. And you were 19 at that time?
Yeah.
So maybe take me through the timeline there. In July, you wanted to get a driver's license, is that right?
Yeah, I had gotten my driver's license. I think I was the only one foolish enough to actually study the book all the way through. I got 100 on the test. I was really excited.
Yeah.
And he gave me the number as soon as I got home with the little temporary thing, and he gave me her number. Like, he knew that was it. That was the buck was up, right?
Because you're kind of on the radar at that point, right?
Yeah, like that was it. It was gonna happen.
Do you have any sense, probably not at that time, but did you have any sense of maybe what your mom might have been going through at that time?
Well, I really didn't know that she had been trying even, so it just seemed to me like she kind of, you know, went and moved on.
Right.
I met her the following year in Mexico, and that's when I really kind of realized, you know, I saw pictures of my brothers and sisters, you know, everything, the just their house, pictures of the house, and then the pictures, the child find through that. That's the first time I'd seen it. Right? I was like, what is this all about? So that was the beginning of that. A couple of years later, I was working in Penticton, and somebody mentioned how close Calgary was, but it was being discussed sort of, it's 12 hours, we're not going to Calgary, and I would travel my whole life. So I was like, 12 hours, that's a joke. So I hop on up to go and to meet my brother and sister and everybody, and that was it. I had to have stuff shipped from Penticton after that, so I stayed there.
And did you feel an immediate connection?
No, it took a while. It was weird,
Sure.
I was foolish too. I thought, well, you owe me 20 years worth of allowance. Yeah. So that was my first thought. And so after that, we sort of we bonded really well. It was really nice. She's into music.
Yeah.
She was a musician, and so we automatically had a connection there. And my brothers and sisters, not so much. My sister, my sisters, but I don't know. That's about it, really.
Unfortunately, both your mom and your dad have passed away now.
Yeah.
How do you feel about them? I guess especially your dad. What are your thoughts about your dad?
Well, he was an extremely kind man. I mean, his mission was to save the world. He was saving the world. If it killed him, and it did. It really did. He was traveling to Singapore every year. I mean, that's. I went once, and the jet lag. I think I still have jet lag from that. And that was like 10 years ago, but. He was just incredibly kind to everybody. It wasn't, I believe strongly that he was doing the right thing, the best way he knew how. It wasn't, I don't know, it's hard to say, but it didn't seem like I had no clue that there was abduction involved.
Right. And this is
So,
obviously very complicated emotionally. There's, just even processing this is.
I've come to terms with it, it's.
Yeah. But I guess just, somebody from the outside looking at this may just automatically assume that your dad is the villain in this.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say so. I think that from his point of view, he was saving, not abducting, right? He saw, I know that after Korea, after everything that he'd been through with the music industry, he kind of went, my son's not going through that, and that's all there was to it.
There's a lot of backstory with your dad that we don't really have time to get into,
Sure.
but your dad, like you said, he was in Korea in the military. He was a private investigator in Toronto. He was involved in missing persons cases. He was a very successful record producer in Toronto, and then kind of broke away from that. And during the time you guys were traveling, he was working, say, as a natural healer. Is that the right way to describe it?
It was
natural health community?
Sort of a rejuvenation mission. It was fasting, raw foods, vegetarianism, veganism, really. Right. And he dedicated his life to that. He wrote 2 books. And knowing that now, I kind of go, well, it's weird that he wouldn't have been, that would have popped up. But I think it's a sort of a niche thing, right? That wouldn't be on the radar, I guess.
Right. Just to backtrack a little bit, talking about, whether or not your dad is a villain, did you even realize you were in a negative situation? You didn't know you were abducted, so this was the only life you know. Phyllis, you and I were talking yesterday about people who are abducted, and sometimes after they're found, it's quite traumatic for them to be reintroduced to a new family. It's almost like they feel abducted again. Is that
right? And the longer they've been gone, the more time it takes for them to reconnect with their family.
Sure.
And one young lady told me one time, you abducted me all over again when you made me return to my
the family.
Family.
Right.
To the, to the person who had legal.
Because it is complicated, and you and I have talked about the fact that once you were found, it's almost like you were taken away from this life that you enjoyed and were used to.
Yeah, I really the education side of it is really my only regret. I mean, I was surfing the whole time. Yeah. It was totally fine with me, and I got to Calgary and I went, there's not even a decent river here to jump into, and so it was a little bit of a shock like that. So I mean, the timeline I think was good in a way. Yeah. If this had all happened when I was 12, I think I might have been. I did have to tell them to drop it, or I was gone. because they were, my dad showed up in Calgary, and my sister's, telling my mother that here's the guy you've been looking for, make your move, whatever,
Yeah.
And I told them both. I said, look, I don't know whose story to believe here. I trust you both. I also don't trust either of you.
Yeah.
So you drop it, or I'm gone, and I know how to be gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Like any situation, there were positives from this, right?
Sure.
Your dad was a great woodworker, and now you're kind of carrying that tradition, right?
Yeah.
You learned that from your dad?
Yeah, and languages, like I speak Spanish, English, and Texan. a little Newfoundlandese. I can understand everything.
Yeah. But the woodworking is something you've followed through on.
Yeah. He was a great carpenter. He worked on boats in Fort Lauderdale. In Brooksville, it was furniture, really nice furniture. And yeah, I didn't have any tools for the longest time, but I got to Calgary, I got a house. It wasn't until a couple of years later that it dawned on me that I can have tools. I'm not in my mom's house, right? I can't really have a table saw in my mom's house, so. Yeah, I just started working. I started working as a stair rail installer.
Right.
That's kind of what I do by trade. Don't tell anybody that. I don't want to do that anymore. But yeah.
But you're focusing on something else connected to woodwork.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Oh, musical instruments, good guitars and basses. Yeah, I build. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, Jonah builds amazing custom guitars and basses. We were at his workshop a couple weeks ago, and it's really impressive.
Yeah.
So, and you're hoping to kind of push that a little more.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. It's difficult because it seems to be a value thing, right? It seems there's no brand name attached to it really until recently. So hopefully that works out. But yeah,
That's great. You've been found for 25 years now. Phyllis, you spent quite a bit of your life and your career helping to find Jonah. This is actually the first time they're meeting in 25 years, so it's quite an honor to have you guys here. What is this like, though, to actually have a chance to talk to Jonah and see Jonah?
Wonderful, and really exciting.
Because I think one thing, about your story is that it lets people know, if someone is missing, there is hope that they may come back, regardless of the circumstances. There was a story from Lethbridge about 2 or 3 months ago where 3 sisters had disappeared, I think about 30 years ago. Yeah. They chose to leave, but they were found 30 years later, still really don't want anything to do with the rest of the family, but just knowing that they're alive, there is hope out there for some of these cases where people are still missing.
We never give up.
Yeah.
And we tell people that too. And Jonah proves that. That's why we never give up. And we have found children after 3.5 years, and 8 years, and 12 years, and Jonah's 17 years. So we just keep plugging away, and somebody knows something. And if we put out that picture often enough, maybe somebody will come forward and report it to the police and try to reunite these people, whether they want to be reunited or not. Sure. But at least there is some closure or some way for people to move forward.
Right. Well, thank you for all that you do. We really appreciate what you are doing for the people here, what you're doing for the community, and giving people hope. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And Jonah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Jonah, thank you very much for sharing your story. I know it's quite an amazing story, and there's a lot of facets and a lot of details, but we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and giving people hope. So thank you, Jonah.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.